What I'd like to show you now is a very simple visual demonstration of a queue. So what we have is a queue which has 6 visible items. The queue in fact goes on infinitely, but we'll show the first 6 items. And when I click the create button, it's going to start adding items to the queue. And it's going to add them from the head of the queue, which is the first or leftmost item, and it's going to add them to the right. So we're going to click create. And as we can see, we're adding items to the queue. Now, I'm going to have you imagine that these items are some unit of work. These are messages or commands coming in from some process. And the first command is 104, and then eventually we pick up process and we execute 104, and we can see what we just did here. Now we can execute the next value of 94 and 24. But while we're processing 24, maybe a few more items come in. And then we'll start to process those, and a few more items come in, and we'll process those. And what's nice about storing these items in a queue is that even though we're not processing them quite as fast as they come in, we're also not losing the values. And this is one of the reasons queues are so popular in computer science. They're a structure that allow us to take incoming data and store it in a way that allows us to process it later, but in the order it showed up, which is a sort of fairness that you often look for in computer science. So eventually we process all the items and the queue is empty. Now I want to show you very briefly how this was implemented because it's something we'll look at again in a future clip. So this is implemented as a very simple WPF app. And this is not meant to be a great example of how WPF app should be written. It's meant to very verbosely demonstrate how this might be done. So as you can see, we have all the controls we were just looking at. And there's 2 buttons that do work, create and process. And what create does is it enqueues into our queue of integers a random number between 0 and 200. And then it calls this update grid. And what update grid does is it draws the integer values within our grid. Now I went with a very, very linear way of doing this to make it very clear what's happening. We clear everything out. We enumerate over the queue using the queue's enumerator. And if we're within the first 6 items, we'll just display that in the appropriate label. Otherwise, we'll break out. And that's why we're only showing 6 items. So it's a very straightforward demo. But what I think it does nicely is it demonstrates visually how items exist in a queue, where they're put into the queue and then taken out of the queue. And they can be put in and taken out.